dengan Al-Asrul Awakhir min Ramadan. Ya. Dan semoga acara ini bisa berlangsung dengan hikmat dan bermanfaat bagi kita semuanya. Dan terima kasih kepada para partisipan yang sudah berpartisipasi, ya, dan diharapkan bagi yang belum juga untuk mengirimkan naskah 4-6 halaman di bidang Religious and Islamic Studies, juga di bidang Education and Psychology, di bidang Economy, Science, dan Social Science, yang insya Allah nanti untuk kita terbitkan secara open access oleh penerbit yang sangat prestigius, yaitu Taylor and Francis. Ya. Melalui proceeding ini akan diajukan untuk terindeks pada Scopus, ya, pada Compendex EI dan Clarivate Analytic atau Web of Science. Ya. Yang insya Allah nanti penjelasannya itu akan disampaikan oleh para pembicara kita pada hari ini, ya, yaitu Pak Prof. Asep Saifuddin Jahar, Pak Prof. Stephen Eric Kraus, dan Ibu Dr. Maila D. Usni Rahim, MA. Nah, ada 3 acara. Pertama nanti opening speech, ya, sambutan dari Pak Direktur, kemudian penjelasan, ya, speech dari Profesor Stephen Eric Kraus, ya, dan akan saya buka langsung tanya jawab, kemudian dari Ibu Dr. Maila, dan langsung juga tanya jawab. Baik, untuk acara yang pertama, saya persilahkan kepada Bapak Profesor Asep Saifuddin Jahar, MA, PhD, untuk menyampaikan sambutan opening speech-nya. Selama kurang lebih 10 menit, saya persilahkan.
Terima kasih. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim wa bihi nasta'in ala umuri dunya waddin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajmain, amma ba'du. First of all, I would like to thank the chairman and I would to extend my gratitude and honorable to the speakers and all audience that this afternoon, today we will deal with our 5th international colloquium. That first of all, I would like to thank Professor Kraus, who has been here and who has been ready to join with us, and all audiences here. Of course, I would like to emphasize this. This program that will be very important for our students, for us as lecturers and the researchers. So we will continue every year to hold this academic colloquium. So I would like to invite all the students and lecturers and or researchers to involve in this colloquium, which cover interdisciplinary education, Islamic studies, science, social, and so on. So it will be the good experience for us and for you all, that we will publish and we will disseminate our research results, so it will be read by the academic in the world. Of course, many procedures will be guided by the organizer, Mrs. Umi, and also all her colleagues, especially Bu Maila, who always engage very every day, every time engage in this program. So all the students, especially graduate school, I strongly invite you to involve in this program, and also you can design what will be presented in this colloquium, and don't think first about the fees of this program that will be negotiated. If your academic result or your writing or your paper is reputable or accepted as the good paper for this colloquium. Jadi sekali lagi saya harap kepada semua untuk partisipasi sebagai academic exercise kepada teman-teman. Kita tidak lagi jago kandang, tapi we should expose to the world our rating and our research should be exposed to the academic global academic, jadi bisa dikenal oleh dunia. Dan saya sekali lagi mengucapkan terima kasih kepada organizer, Bu Maila dan kawan-kawan, Pak Usep, Bu Umi, Bu Dewi, dan semuanya yang selalu menyiapkan dan mendampingi teman-teman semua. Mari kita budayakan budaya akademik ini dengan sesungguh-sungguhnya, tanpa berpikir nanti saya dapat apa atau nanti ingin seperti apa. Karena ketika itu sudah dilakukan, pasti apa yang akan dicapai oleh kita akan menunggu. Dan itu adalah sebuah tradisi. Dan ini kita tradisikan untuk saling menopang, saling mendukung, dan saling mendorong. Jadi kalau G20 itu strong together, itu kan, kita juga akan will be stronger if we work together. Jadi kalau kita bersama, kita kooperatif, kita membangun kerjasama dan juga saling menopang satu sama lain, maka ini akan menjadi bahan untuk menyebarkan budaya akademik. Terima kasih sekali lagi, bersemangat, dan kami tunggu karya-karya Anda untuk bisa dipublikasikan. Jangan memikirkan masalah biaya registrasi dulu. Kalau karyanya itu sangat meyakinkan, kami akan memberikan ruang-ruang yang lebih memadai untuk karya itu. Jadi ini nulis saja belum sudah bertanya tentang biaya, padahal karya tulisannya nggak ada. Jadi Anda kalau sudah sebagai akademisi ya tanggung jawabnya hanya satu, riset. Oke, terima kasih untuk semuanya. Semoga bisa mengikuti kegiatan ini dan good luck for you all, and we wish you well for all the time, and we wish you also Idul Fitri. Have a nice Eid for those who enjoy or the holiday Eid in their hometown. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Profesor Asep Saifuddin Jahar MA PhD untuk sambutannya yang sangat memotivasi kita semuanya, terutama sekali lagi kepada para peserta semua yang terutama ada di diskusi online ini. Mohon setelah ini semakin terdorong untuk siap-siap ya menulis dan mengirimkan tulisannya 4-6 halaman di bidang yang tadi saya sebutkan ya, Religious and Islamic Studies, Education and Psychology, Economy, Science, and Social Science gitu ya. Jadi dan itu sesuai dengan moto yang tadi diutarakan oleh Pak Direktur, yaitu membaca dunia dan dibaca dunia ya, reading the world and being read by the globe kira-kira mungkin demikian. Terima kasih Pak Direktur. Next, we would be pleased to invite our speaker, Professor Stephen Eric Kraus, atau Bapak Abdul Latif Abdullah, to deliver his speech about features of a high-quality paper and the importance of ensuring paper quality. I would like to give you 15 to 20 minutes to address your speech. The time is yours.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good afternoon to everyone, to all my friends in Indonesia. Thank you, Dr. Yusuf, for introducing me, alhamdulillah, and Dr. Maila and the rest of the organizing committee for inviting me today. It's always a pleasure to meet up with my friends in Indonesia. So thank you very much for inviting me. So I've been given a very short time of just 20 minutes, and the topic is quite a big one for a 20-minute presentation. So I'm going to do the best that I can, inshallah, with the time given to me. And I will jump right in because I don't have a whole lot of time here. So we'll try to get right to the topic. And then, of course, I understand there's question and answer later in the program. Yeah. So if there's any questions, please feel free to save them for now, and then later we can address them. One of the things that's becoming a global phenomenon in the academic world is this is the concern and the interest on writing for high impact scientific journals. And so I understand now that Indonesian universities are very big now on increasing the rate as well as the quality of publications in scientific journals. Malaysia, we have also undergone this process now, where we've put a lot of emphasis on high quality publications. And it's something that has always been a sort of quality or a characteristic of universities, but now it's really become a global phenomenon. So I have the privilege of being an associate editor for 3 different journals, and so I get to view and screen and review a lot of articles, and so I can see now the variety and the diversity of places that we're getting articles from now is really incredible. Countries from all over the world now, universities are doing research in so many different areas, and we're just getting this real diverse pattern now in submissions to journals. So it's really interesting. And one of the things that I notice about one of the journals that I do editing for is Britannica, which is a Malaysian-based journal. And one of the things about Britannica is that we get a lot of submissions from Indonesian scholars and graduate students. So it's very interesting to see the kind of research that you're doing in Indonesia, and it's really interesting research. But just in relation to what Professor Asap just mentioned in his opening speech, I just wanted to quickly comment on that, because he mentioned about the need for all of us, including yourselves, to be able to position our research in the broader sort of global setting. So even though you may be doing a study on a very localized topic, how can you relate that to the broader world? How can somebody in the United States or Turkey or Russia, how can they benefit from what you're studying in Indonesia? And I think that's really one of the challenges that a lot of our colleagues in this part of the world face. We have a hard time trying to communicate how this research, these findings that we have are relevant to people outside of our own local context. So that's just one thing that I would really emphasize to everyone, is really try to think of yourself as a member in a field that is a global field, right? It's a community of scholars, you know, and you're trying to communicate to this global community what you've uncovered in your research. Okay, so really think about that in your writing. It's a very important part of writing for high impact journals, because journal editors, they want to see something that's relevant to their broader audience. Okay, so first of all, let's just quickly look at what is a high impact journal anyway. What do we mean by a high impact journal? And one of the things is that, as I just mentioned, for editors of high impact journals, and these of course are journals that would be indexed. I mean, typically we use these kinds of these metrics for determining whether a journal is high impact. So it's got some kind of metric in either the Web of Science database or Scopus. Those are the two big ones. And so there's this idea that this journal has an impact on the field of study. Okay, so whatever field you're in, this is a journal that is read often. Okay, people, especially the top scholars in this field, they publish in this journal, they read this journal. People that are really interested in the latest research in this area, they're going to read from this particular journal or these journals. So it has an impact on the field of study because it produces the most cutting edge research that the field is going to be interested in. Okay, so that's one way of measuring impact. The other one is the knowledge base. A journal that is consistently putting out new knowledge to broaden the knowledge base in that field is going to be considered a high impact journal. Okay, and this is why often these high impact journals, they often produce articles that make use of the latest, most sophisticated research tools and methodologies and data sets, okay, because they are trying to be on the cutting edge of contributing to the knowledge base, okay? But what's interesting is that we tend to forget that also includes things like the latest research in indigenous communities, right? So a lot of us in this part of the world, we forget that our fields are often very interested nowadays in what's going on in more indigenous types of settings, all right? So local cultures, indigenous cultures, right? Because these are things that are becoming of more interest actually to a global kind of community. All right, so knowledge, contributing to the knowledge base, all right? And then also the impact on the setting being studied. So does your research have an impact on either practitioners and or policymakers in the setting that you're doing your research, okay? So how can this research actually contribute to policy development? How can it contribute to practice, okay? That's also a form of impact that we cannot neglect. And then, of course, there are some articles that make a strong contribution to research methodologies, okay? So if you're using, some sort of new innovative approach to doing qualitative research, for example, or even quantitative, it doesn't really matter, but you're making a concrete contribution in the area of research methodology, this is also considered to be something of high impact. Okay, so these are essentially the major ways that we can sort of judge whether an article is going to be considered worthy of a high impact journal. So why do we want to publish in these high impact journals? Well, these are the journals that, at least in the academic arena, these get the most people reading them. They have the highest reading rates, all right? And then if your work in those journals is being read at a higher rate, that means that it's more likely that it will be used by others, right? And so this is why they've sort of defined high impact according to these quantitative metrics like reading rates and impact factors and all that, because there is a sort of quantitative element to it. Now, of course, there's a lot of criticism, and myself included, criticism about what is really high impact and why do we rely solely on these metrics and all that. Yes, it is it's almost a game in a lot of ways because of the ways that people can manipulate these metrics. And it has a lot of flaws, there's no question, okay? I'm not supporting or not supporting, I'm just saying this is the way it's pretty much defined, okay? So just so we know. So higher reading rates, all right? higher citation rates. So once the articles are read, then they're cited by others. All right. More recognition in terms of scholarly contribution. All right. So the more we produce in these journals with these types of reputations as being high impact, journals that are well known in the field, this also leads to greater opportunities for you to do further research. Okay. It helps you to acquire research grants. It helps you to collaborate with other scholars in your field and often in other countries and so forth. So it actually creates more opportunities to further your own research agenda, whatever that is, okay? So it sort of opens doors in a lot of ways. Okay, and like I mentioned, it's not without criticism, okay? And there have even been, as you can see on my slide there have even been Nobel Prize winners who have decided to boycott top journals because of the practices that many of them are undertaking now. Okay, so again, it's not a system that's without criticism for sure. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit, and I want to just start with this. 4 reasons why articles get rejected. There have been several articles written like this, mostly by journal editors, all right? And I do another talk, a longer talk, usually for about 2 or 3 hours, that actually has 10 points related to why articles get rejected. All right, and so this one is a nice synopsis. It covers 4 major issues, 4 major problems that editors often have with journal articles. And so as you can see here, as it says, the problem with article publishing often starts way before writing. Okay, and the very first thing that we have to pay attention to is whether the research makes a sufficiently large contribution to the body of knowledge in a specific discipline. If a study is purely descriptive or just replicates previous research, or it uses a very simplistic design, very small sample size, perhaps, it doesn't present anything that's really new. It's more of just repeating what's already in the literature. Those are kind of the red flags for a journal to not want to publish the article, okay? Because from a journal's perspective, they're trying to sell their journal, and their product is research, right? Their product is the latest, most interesting, cutting edge research findings, okay? Most relevant research findings, especially relevant to important issues. So if your study doesn't help them to do that, really to sell their journal, they're going to be sort of leery in terms of whether, they're going to not really be too excited to publish that paper, okay? So that means that we have to really know what's in the literature in our field, okay? Whatever your discipline is, you really have to be reading the latest literature and to know, okay, this is what they're interested in. This is what's going on. This is what's important according to the research community. These are the issues that they are focusing on. These are the research methods that are getting a lot of attention now. All those kinds of things. We have to read our own literatures very critically to really have an idea of, okay, where does my research fit? Where do I position my research in this broader field? Okay, so if we can do that, then that will really increase our chances of getting published in these high impact journals. The second one is to have a strong theoretical basis, a conceptual framework, okay, that's well developed, okay? And you see here, one of the reasons here it says that articles get rejected is they don't have a sufficient conceptual framework. The core constructs are not well defined. There's not much of a theoretical basis for the study, even for the hypotheses, okay? So that just shows that you're not really building on the previous work in your field, right? Like in all scholarship, and even in, of course, even in our own Islamic studies, scholarship really is the art or the practice of building on all of those who have come before us, right, and done this work, and we are taking what they've done and we're extending it a little bit. We're taking it a little bit further than our predecessors. That's scholarship in any field, whether it's physics or Islamic studies. Scholarship is scholarship, right? So we have to show that we know what the what the literature in our field has, is that what's there and what our previous scholars have said, and we want to build on that. And one of the ways you do that is by having a strong theoretical foundation, because theory is really the accumulation of knowledge, and it's been put in a form that's predictive. Okay, it shows certain predictions, but it's really building on that previous knowledge. Okay, so having a strong grasp of the literature that's come before helps a lot. And then the methodology used in the study is seriously flawed. Okay, so you really have to pay attention to methods, your methods and the methodology used in your study. Make sure you're basing your research on a strong methodology. Okay, you can't make up, you can't, if you've done a study that hasn't used a strong methodological approach, you can't make that up in the article. It's not, it just doesn't work. Right? So you have to start with the research itself. So make sure your research that you're doing has a strong methodology. And then, of course, last, here Summers mentions the author's writing style is disorganized and the article is not structured properly. Okay. So I always comment on this. I mean, a lot of us, I am a native. Originally, I'm from the United States. I'm American. So English is my first language. Of course, that gives me a great advantage. There's no question, because most of these journals are English-based. And it puts many English as a second language writers at a disadvantage. However, I do want to emphasize that writing is not language, okay? You can be a very good English speaker and be a very bad writer, right? You can be a very good and I've witnessed this among many people in this part of the world: Japanese, Chinese, Indonesian, Malaysian. Their English is not very good per se, but they can write really well. Writing and speaking, are two different skills, right? So you can be a very good writer and not even be that good in English. So the point here is that writing style is a skill that we can work on, okay? And even if you write in Bahasa Indonesia and then you translate to English, just because you got a good translator that translated the English well, doesn't mean the paper is going to be written well. Writing is a separate skill. So we have to learn and know how to write these articles. Okay, so that's really important. Okay, we have to understand different worldviews of journal publishers. So if you're the author, this is kind of the way the author thinks. I have something to say and it should be published right now. This is really good scholarship. A reviewer, someone that's going to actually review your paper, okay, which is different than the editor. I'm going to get to the editor in a second. The reviewer who's been asked to referee or review your paper, their job is to look for problems in the methods and the analysis, okay, or in the introduction, whatever. But their job is to find flaws in your work. That's their job. The editor is thinking something entirely different. The editor is looking at the article to say, is this article interesting? Will other people cite this article? Will this article bring more readers to my journal? Again, they're trying to sell their journal, right? So one of the things they're looking for is high quality, and that's the job of the reviewer to ensure that the article is high quality. But they're also looking not only at the quality of the paper, but they're also looking at, is this an article of interest to my readers? Okay. So as authors, if we're writing papers, we have to remember these three worldviews. Okay. So when we write a paper, we have to make sure that it's of high quality so that the reviewers will give it an endorsement. We also have to think about, is this topic going to be of interest to this journal? Okay. And how can I position the paper? How can I write the paper in a way that's going to make it an article of interest to the editor? Okay, so it's very important that we have these things in mind when you're writing. Okay, because nowadays, as it says, scholarly articles are the common currency. The currency of. Oops, we're being hacked.
Busada bisa dimatikan. Okay, please continue.
Okay. So for social sciences, and I believe most of us in this forum today are from the social sciences, Islamic studies is multidisciplinary, so the social sciences. But it's really important that we also understand about the critical importance of what's called the takeaway, right? And the takeaway is a way of thinking about the main contribution of your paper. Okay, so think of your paper and the takeaway that you want the reader to get. What do you want the reader to take away from your paper? What's the main argument that you're going to make? So think of your paper as an argument. All right. Think of your paper as an argument. Okay. So a good argument, you state a position, right? And you want to support that argument with evidence. So the better you do that, the clearer the takeaway of the paper will be. So state your thesis as a question, and the goal of the research is to answer the question. And that's what you're going to do in the paper. And don't get too carried away. I see a lot of authors, they like to put in all these many, many questions in one paper. Don't do that, okay? Simplify, focus on one core question and really answer that question really well with your evidence, with your literature review, with your the research evidence, the analysis and so forth. Really focus on answering that question really well, okay? Another important area is discussion. A lot of us, we may write a beautiful paper up until the results, but then in the discussion, we don't make any claims as to how these findings actually relate and contribute to the body of knowledge. And that's a big loss, because that's really the whole crux of the paper, is to show how why this research is interesting and important. And that happens in the discussion. Okay. So evidence takes many forms. It depends on what kind of paper you're writing. Could be theories, could be facts, could be figures, could be stories. Okay. Depending on what type of paper you're writing. Okay. But you want to make it clear how the evidence supports your argument, right? That's very important. And then the context. What's the context of the study? Okay. So it's important. Yes. Like I said, it's important to talk about how the paper contributes to the larger field, the body of knowledge, but also tell us something about the local setting, the local context. Tell us a little bit about the culture. Tell us about the history. Why is this topic relevant and important in the local context as well? We have to do both. Okay, we have to do both. It's not one or the other. It's both. Okay, and that's really important to remember. And then finally, application. If your argument is correct, right? The argument you're making in this paper, if it's correct, what are the potential consequences if we pay attention to it? Okay. So for example, I just finished a study on the importance of emotional engagement among minority students in school. If we say that emotional engagement is really important, especially for minority students in schools, so what? What does that mean? What does that mean for educators? What does that mean for educational policymakers? What does that mean for the students, right? Well, it's going to make them want to come to school, right? And so of course, from that, obviously it's important. Right. So that's basically the idea. So these four elements are very important, so that the reader and the editor and the reviewer all are clear about what they're getting, what they're taking away from your paper. Okay. If that is not clear, the reader can't seem to figure it out, it's going to make for a weak paper. Okay. And chances are it's not going to be accepted. So I have to kind of go fast. I only have a couple minutes left. So just a few things that prepare you for publishing in high impact journals. Read lots of journal articles, okay, especially other high impact journal articles, because that will get you to see and to understand, first of all, what kind of language you need to use, what kind of, how do these authors present their arguments? How do they make a literature review concise? How do they present the results? How do they discuss? All these things. The more we read these types of articles, the better we'll be at writing them as well. Familiarize yourself with the latest trends in your field, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to follow those trends like, oh, in the US, they're studying this, so I have to study that in Indonesia. No, not at all. But it'll help you to understand how your research in Indonesia can fit into what they are really interested in, okay? So that's why also choosing the right journal is very important, because you want to find a journal that's going to be amenable and accepting of your research, right? They're going to be interested in your research. So that takes some study sometimes. You have to do some homework. You have to go through the journals and look at their websites and the scope and all that to see really whether your article is going to be a good fit with that journal. Okay, sometimes it takes time to decide on the right journal. Update your research methods, skills, and knowledge. Okay, so try to always keep updating your own knowledge on research methods. All right, so you can incorporate the latest methods into your research. All right, that will help as well. When colleagues ask you to review their papers for them, do it. It's a good experience. It will help you to become a better writer as well. Okay, because you're gonna see, oh, you know what? They should have done this. They should have done that. This sounds good. This doesn't sound good. Oh, they should have moved that here. That's all going to help you when you go to write your own articles. Okay, so try to help out your colleagues, support them, and then also help by reviewing their articles for them. And then if you're invited to act as a reviewer for journals, do it. It's good experience. And again, it will help you to familiarize yourself. And then, of course, just submit articles, submit manuscripts, and try. I mean, my own experience, I really learned how to write academic articles by rejection, by getting rejected in a lot of journals, and then getting the comments back, and then really learning about, okay, oh, this is what they want, this is what they expect, right? And then making a lot of my own revisions to my articles, and then eventually getting published and then learning how to do it. So, I mean, the best teacher is experience, right? And learning from your mistakes, learning from both rejections and acceptances. Okay, we can learn that way. It's a very powerful way of learning. All right, and then when you're asked to resubmit an article, it's been rejected, but they've asked you to resubmit it. Please do it. Take the time, make the corrections, even if it takes you a few months. Go one by one, make the corrections very carefully, and then resubmit the article. Don't just give up and say, "Oh, it's too much work," because you'll never learn how to do it that way. Okay, you need to actually really get down, put in the time, the effort, and really work at perfecting the skill. Write, and write. Okay, writing is a skill that requires, you just have to do it a lot. In order to get better at it, you have to do it regularly. So if you're not doing it very often, it's really hard to get better at writing. All right, so I would encourage everybody just to write as much as you can, as often as you can, right? Even if it's not academic writing, just get in the habit of writing a lot. Okay, a few more. Be clear about what your research is contributing, both practically and theoretically. Okay, so when you do research, when you want to go and write an article about it, you're communicating to the world the value of your research. So you need to be clear about what this research is contributing. If you're not clear about that, it's going to be very hard for you to write a good journal article about the research. All right. Prepare to draft and redraft your articles several times, especially if you're going for high impact journals. It's going to take work, right? And it requires multiple drafts, right? Don't just think that, oh, I just do one draft and I can submit it. No. You need to go back, put it away for a few days, go back to it, read it again. Oh, that doesn't sound good. I need to rewrite that part. Here, my co-author, let them look it over for me and tell me what they think. Oh, they've given me some comments. I need to change, make those make the amendments based on those comments. So it's the process of, trying to really perfect the work. So be prepared just to draft it and redraft it many times. Okay. Don't just settle for a first draft. If you have a team of authors, try to write as a team. In other words, maybe if you have two, three, even 4 people working on an article, each person can take one section of that article to focus on, right? And then come together and really make it work. This is really, I think, a more effective way of writing than the old, what we call the party paper. Okay, so party papers are like, you have one person as the main author, and you've got like 6 or 7 authors, but it's really just that one person doing all the work. Those papers don't really work very well. Harder to get published that way. Okay, so really try to collaborate and write as a team. As I said before, really know the journal you wish to write for. What do they want? Okay, what kind of articles do they publish? Do they even publish articles, using qualitative research methods? You need to really do your homework about the journal that you want to target. If you can, target that journal before you start writing. Okay, and then try to write according to the specifications of that journal. Make sure all the sections of the paper align. Avoid disjointedness. Okay, and this relates to the previous comment by the editor about article structure. Right. In a lot of workshops I do, I try to pay a lot of attention to this issue of a disjointedness in writing. So how do we make each section in the article flow, right? So it's easy to read, easy to understand, and all that. So that's a very important part of writing. Okay, take time to respond to reviewers. If they give you comments, as I mentioned, take time to respond. Don't rush. Make sure you're really answering their comments thoroughly. Try to plan your papers out in the same way you plan research. Okay, so let's sit down with the team and figure out, okay, what are we going to write? How long is it going to take? Who's going to write which sections? What do we want to focus on, etc. Okay, planning helps a lot. So it says here, I know you've had over 100 articles published, but my question was, have you ever made a contribution to the literature? Okay, and this is a dilemma that we have nowadays, because nowadays our universities are all asking us to produce a lot of papers, right? Publish. But are we really making any kind of contribution with that publication? Okay, and this is what we should be concerned with. I'm concerned with it. I don't like just publishing for the sake of publishing. If I write a paper, I want it to be a meaningful paper with a really useful and relevant result. Okay, that's just, I mean, to me that really is motivating. All right, when I want to do writing, spend all this time on writing an article, I really want it to be a good article. I want it to be something of value. Right, so think about what contribution are we making with this paper. So just the importance of writing here. There's a lot of resources now online. All these different websites and articles, journals even have their own, a lot of resources on how to write journal articles effectively, how to get published. So please make use of all these online resources, okay? There's even entire books, like this is a very popular book. I have a colleague here at UPM that is using this as a guide to her own writing. Okay, so writing your journal article in 12 weeks. Now notice it says 12 weeks, 3 months. That's not a very short period of time, but it's actually pretty quick for writing a journal article, especially for, if you're going for a good journal that has to be high quality. 3 months is actually not that long to write a journal article. Okay, but so this title of this book is Writing Your Article in 12 Weeks. All right, and it takes you week by week what you should be doing week by week, step by step. All right, so these are good places to start. Okay, and then there's a lot of other really good articles out there on how to improve your academic writing. Okay, so this is a very good article on why academic writing stinks and how to fix it. All right, and there's been many articles along these lines. Okay. So that's all I have. I've gone way over my time, and that was very fast. So I apologize for going over my time, but thank you very much. I hope there'll be more time for questions if you have them later. Inshallah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Abdul Latif Kraus, for your excellent presentations. And now I would like to open the time for question and answer to all of the audience. And until now, we have 127 participants. Yeah, it is an amazing number of participants, I think. And you may raise your hands, yeah, and also you may address your question by chat. In advance, Professor Abdul Latif Kraus, I would like to ask questions. You were saying that making a contribution to the literature or to the body of knowledge that we are writing about is highly important. Can you help me out to elaborate what you mean with contributions and how to make it? Yeah, how to make it? Do we have to say, for instance, in our thesis as an argument that this paper tries to examine the theory of blah blah blah, for instance, like that. So and that's my question. And let me see some questions from our participants in the chat. From Pak Ismi, yeah, Pak Ismi, and it is shared by Pak Imam Abdullah. Yeah, let me read it. Okay, so you write so many articles and drafts, but you actually never send any because you just want it to be perfect, or you just wait for something you don't even know what, and in the end, you didn't actually send anything. any advice how to avoid this? Because I bet so many people here did this. Thank you. And then it is also shared by Imam Abdullah, yeah, by Muhammad Izdi, etc. So we have first two questions.
Okay.
Latif. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Thank you. Thank you, Pak Ismi, for the question. It's a very good question, and I admire your commitment to perfectionism. No, seriously, it's in fact here I think we have. Well, it depends. I think that people are different. You know, some people they have the opposite problem. They don't spend enough time trying to improve their work. Whereas, yes, but the opposite can be true. That people are so worried about whether it's good enough, and so they don't send it, and they just keep working on it. So I think there has to be a sort of happy medium. You have to find the moderate, the sort of the middle ground. But one way of sort of getting around that, I think, and this has a lot to do with how we work. With journal articles, it's really, really difficult to do it all on your own. To rely, because with any kind of writing, I mean, this is why writers like novelists, they have publishers, they have editors. I mean, even these very famous novelists, they send their work to editors, and editors give them real substantive feedback on how to improve their writing. So we have to do the same thing. You cannot do it all on your own. At some point, you look at a draft and you go, you know what? I don't know what else to do with this paper. So at this point, I'm going to give it to my colleague who I know has a very critical eye and likes to provide really good feedback, and let them read it and then give me feedback. All right. And so that's why if you have co-authors, that's the way co-authors are supposed to work. We're supposed to be supporting each other and, and giving each other constructive feedback. Otherwise, what's the point of having co-authors? There's no point. Okay. So unfortunately, we try to do all this on our own, and it's very difficult to do on your own. So I would really encourage you to try to collaborate, work together, and give each other feedback on the writing. And then at some point, you say, you know what, I don't really know what else we can do with this paper. We've tried our best, so just submit it and see what happens, right? I mean, there's usually three things that will happen when you submit an article. It'll either get accepted, but you'll still have to make some improvements. Never in any kind of high quality journal, they will never outright accept the paper. Never. It doesn't happen to anybody. Like, your paper's perfect, we're just going to publish it tomorrow. It doesn't happen. There's always going to be some level of improvement. You have to make some improvements to it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is they'll say revise and resubmit. It needs major corrections. So what they're saying is that we think the paper has potential, but you need to make some improvements to it. And these are pretty major improvements, right? And the third one will be that you're going to reject it. Okay. But rejection can be of two types. Rejection can be immediate rejection from the editor, where they don't give you any feedback. They just say, sorry, the paper doesn't fit with our journal or something like that. You get no feedback. That's the one you want to avoid because it doesn't help you at all. But there's also rejection by the reviewers, which means that at least you get comments back. And when they give you those comments, you can then improve the paper based on the comments and then submit it to another journal. Okay, and that will enhance the chances of you getting published in another journal. Okay. So those are, those are really the one of four things is going to happen when you submit a paper. So in three of those situations, you're going to at least get feedback. You're going to get comments and feedback. Okay. And so take those comments seriously and try to improve the paper. All right. So
thank you very much, Prof. Abdul Latif Ros, for your response to the question. And we have another question from Ibu Lia Hyang. Yeah, this is like a Sang Hyang Widi. Ibu Lia asks, how many references should we put it on the best article, and how many years the best references for our research?
How many references in an article? Yeah, that's a good question. I've never really come across an exact number on references, but I would say again, for any of the top journals, what we're calling top journals, they want to see a rigorous literature review, right? So, I wouldn't, let me just throw out a number. I don't, Dr. Mela, maybe you can help me with this, but at least, I would say at least 30, at least, something in that area, at least. But again, it's hard to give a number, because there's some, it depends on the topic that you're studying. There's some topics that, like I just finished a paper on related to school engagement. If anybody knows education, that school engagement is one of the most heavily studied topics in education. So there's literally thousands and thousands of papers on school engagement. So of course, my literature review is very long because, not long, like there's a lot of references because there's a lot of literature to cover in that literature review. Whereas if you're doing a topic that's maybe very localized or it's something that hasn't been studied that much, of course, you're not going to have as many references just because there's not as much research out there. So it really does depend on the topic as well. So it's just really hard to give a specific number on that one. Maybe Dr. Mela wants to share her view on that.
Thank you.
Yes,
yeah, actually, in our postgraduate school of Islamic Studies, we encourage our MA student to come with at least 25 references. And for 50, I think, for PhD students, for their own thesis. So, and let me read another article of Pak Muhammad Izdian, how to deal with a really long time waiting for the publisher to respond to our submissions. How long must we wait? Is it okay to send our article to another publisher while waiting for the answer from the publisher? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mohammed. That's a very good question. It's a very real question because it happens a lot nowadays. Nowadays, the journal waiting times can be very long. So it is. Let me first say it is unethical. It is unethical to submit an article to two journals at the same time. So you cannot do that. All right, and it's a very serious matter. Scholars have been blacklisted from journals because of things like that, doing unethical things like that. It is unethical. So don't do that. Although, however, there comes a time where you have to make a decision. Like I recently had an article that was under review for 7 months. And when I checked, they have the online system, you can check, monitor where the paper is along in the process. And when I wrote the editor, I asked them what the status was, and they said, well, they're having trouble finding another reviewer, a second reviewer. And so that was the status for a long time, like two months or 3 months. It was that same status, trying to find a third reviewer or whatever. At that point, after 7 months, I said, enough, I gave up. So I wrote the editor and I said, I'm withdrawing the article. Okay. So you have to do that. You have to write the editor and tell them formally that you're withdrawing the article. And then I submitted it to a different journal, and the second journal, they had reviewed it in less than 2 months. So there comes a point where you want to say, okay, this is going on for too long. To me, I mean, after 4 months, I start to write the editor in a question, because I mean, they should be able to do it in 4 months. If not 4 months, I don't really know what the problem is, if it's not done within 4 months. So at that point, I will at least ask the editor and find out what's going on. Because it has happened that sometimes editors also, they lose track of papers. Like it's just off their radar and they just forgot to follow up with the reviewer or something, So just sending them a little reminder by email is okay. It's just be respectful, be polite, and just ask them, But yes, there comes a time where enough is enough. You can withdraw and send it somewhere else.
But if we cannot afford to finish within the time that the journal determines, perhaps we can also ask the journal for us to give more time to finish, yeah, Professor.
Oh, if you have to finish your revisions or something within a certain period of time, yes. Oh, yes. You can always ask for an extension, and they almost always give it. It's rarely an issue. Yeah, they'll always give an extension, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Imam Abdullah: how to get the latest data sources?
Okay, I'm not sure what Imam Abdullah means by latest data sources. Do you mean the latest literature, the articles, or is it the actual data?
Perhaps recent references of the topic he's going to write.
Okay, yeah. So having access to the scientific literature is another big issue that's going on now because of the amount of money it costs, the fees for our universities that have to pay to have these journals and stuff. It's really unfortunate. It's become such a big business, and it's really unfortunate because a lot of people don't have access. Even at my own university in Malaysia, we have lost access to a lot of top journals because our university just cannot afford it anymore. And in fact, recently there was a movement by the state of California in the United States. Actually, they even, in a form of protest, the entire state university system, which is about 30 over campuses, they chose not to pay their fees for one of the big publishers. I forgot it was Wiley or Taylor and Francis. They said, we're just not going to pay our fees for these journals anymore. That means a loss of millions and millions of dollars for that publisher. So obviously, it's become a very serious issue, this ability to afford to pay for all these journals. So that said, I don't know what the situation is in your country and in your universities. I don't know how it works, what databases your universities subscribe to and all that. I'm not sure. It's usually determined by either the Ministry of Education or Higher Education or the individual universities. They depending on what they can afford. So, but it is. I mean, I refer a lot just to Google Scholar and whatever's available in open access, ResearchGate. Place those databases where people publish a lot of open access through open access to access articles as much as we can. So we have to be resourceful when it comes to that.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kraus. And I think to the participants, you may go to the website of your school, okay? And then you may try to find the most recent references to JSTOR, for instance. Yeah, I think. Okay, and a question from Pak Aprizal Wahyudi. What are the main factors that cause our journal to fail to be public internationally?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I just want to re-emphasize what I said at the beginning of my talk, because again, like I said, I do get a lot of papers from Indonesia, actually from Southeast Asia, Philippines. We get a lot of papers from Thailand, of course, Malaysia. And one of the things that I see this pattern in a lot of the papers is, the research is very interesting. Methodologies are usually, fine, well done. But they have a really hard time of relating the topic to the larger field. Like, how is this topic going to be of interest to those outside your particular country or your community? So relating the local topic to the broader field, I would say, is the number one problem. Okay. And so how do you do that? You have to be able to situate, and that's where theory comes in. I mean, that's what the editor was talking about. Theory is that theory is universal, right? So theory, you can say, well, you're trying to extend a particular theory by applying it in a new setting or context, this, Indonesia or whatever. And then, because actually, what's really interesting is that a lot of these Western scholars that come up with they're actually very interested in, most of them are very interested in cultural settings, So the more you can do that, the more you can say, this theory worked well here in Indonesia, or this theory didn't work well here in Indonesia. And I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Mela on several papers, and she's very good at doing that. At critiquing the use of Western theories in local contexts, right? And so that's a really important role that we have to play here in places like Malaysia, Indonesia. And that helps to develop the theory, to make the theory more universal to everybody. So it's not just relevant in the United States or whatever. And those people over there, they want it. That's what they want. They want their theories to become relevant to everybody, not just for them. They want to know how their theories work in Indonesia. Many of them, at least. So that's really what they want to see. So if we can do that better, I think we'll have no problem penetrating these types of journals. Okay, but we have to be able to make it relevant to a broader audience, right? And that takes work. I mean, it takes, again, it's good to find examples. I always look for good examples. Find good papers that have done that well, and just try to learn and look at how they've done it. How do they do it? How do they situate in maybe they're talking about some very local community issue, but then they're able to relate it to the bigger field. Like, how do they do it? Let's study how they do it. So read the article very carefully, look at the way they position the use of language, the text, everything. You can really study it, and you can kind of get tips on how to do that from just reading good examples, papers like that. So I would say that's the number one thing. And then, of course, good writing. Good writing is very important, because everybody likes to read a well-written paper. If a paper is really well-written, even if the content is not very good, people, at least they like to read it, But if it's really poorly written and they can't understand things, they're not clear about a lot of things, it makes it very difficult. So just try to do your best at, writing well.
Thank you very much, Professor Kraus. A question from Ibu Iza. Yeah. Sometimes I found, maybe this is sometimes, I think with S. Sometimes I found the articles I read in some journals are complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Hard to be understood. What should I do? Yeah. I believe that the harder the articles to be read, the higher quality the articles. Huh. What do you think about that?
Interesting. No, that's a good question. That's a very good comment. In the last slide I showed I showed the title of that article called "Why Academic Writing Stinks and How to Make It Better." Actually, in that article, the man who wrote that he's an excellent scholar, but he's very critical of a lot of academic writing for that same reason that Lisa just mentioned. Is that a lot of the writing is so inaccessible. You can't even understand what they're saying because they're trying to write at such a conceptual level, and they're purposely making it difficult to understand. And what he says in that article is that is not something good. He said that's actually bad writing, right? So there's no point in writing an article that nobody can understand, right? Because you're using this very highfalutin language and so forth. But so yes, that's true. There are a lot of articles that are written that way. They're just not easy to read. Even for me, like I'm a native speaker, it doesn't matter. There's all this technical language and a lot of conceptual language that is not well defined, and so that is the case of a lot of academic writing for everybody. Some of it is hard to understand. Again, I think the more you read, and of course, when you come across like a term or a concept that you're not clear about, try to go and find the definition of it. It does take some work. Now we have the internet. It's so easy on internet. You can Google something so quickly and get an answer. Okay, so what is this thing? Just Google it and then get there. Oh, okay. So you sort of read slowly, and as you of course build up your vocabulary, you build up your knowledge base on all these different terms. Then the more you read, it'll become clear to you. But it does take some work at first to understand these certain concepts and things that they're using. But no, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because it's hard to read, that means it's a better article. No, I would definitely not agree with that. I mean, some of the best articles in my field that I like to read are the ones that are easily understood. I mean, there's no point in making an article that people can't understand. Writing an article people can't understand. There's really no point to it.
Yeah, thank you. The last question would be from Isnaini. I want to do research about the character of work. What needs to be prepared?
Well, I would just start with a general literature review. Go into your databases at your university, whatever databases you have. Or you can just start with Google Scholar. Google Scholar is a really good place to start with literature review. I think they do a really good job of at least giving you initial access to a broad range of literature. Google Scholar. So start with some very basic search terms, and again, try to start with the latest work, that within the past 5 years or so, and just really look at what kinds of research they're doing in that area, and see what the trends are, and then sort of work your way backwards from there, and you can see. And then also look at, okay, in your particular study context, like in Indonesia, what are people doing research on this topic in Indonesia? If so, what kind of research are they doing? Is it mostly just descriptive work? Is it qualitative, in-depth work? Is it case study? Is it correlational research? So sort of begin to build a sort of sketch or a profile of what kind of research is going on in that area, right? And then think about your own interests and where you'd like to maybe sort of join that discussion. It's really research is really discussion. Join that body of work. So it's good just to start with a broad search and then kind of get a feel for what's going on in the field, right? And then again, go deeper into your specific context to see what's going on. And then from there, you can get more specific. I mean, that would it's just my way. It's just a suggestion. That's the way I would do it. I'm sure Dr. Mela would do it differently. Other people have different ways of doing it, but that's what I would suggest as one approach you can use. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdul Latif Kraus, for your excellent presentations and for your responses to the questions. Please give applause to Professor Abdul Latif Kraus. Thank you very much. And I believe that you have motivated all of us to write our papers academically and ethically, especially for our 5th ICIIS, for our international conference.
Yes.
Now, thank you very much. Yes, Professor?
No, I was just wishing you all the best with the conference, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Amin, Ya Rabbal Alameen.
Amin.
And now we are going to listen to the presentations of Ibu Maila Di Husni Rahim, MA PhD. She is going to address Taylor Francis Open Access publication of ICIIS 2022, a call for submissions. And Ibu Maila has published 3 articles in a highly impactful journals, quarter 1, indexed by Scopus. So Ibu Maila, 15 minutes, the time is yours.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Usep. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to Prof. Abdul Latif Kraus for your time and your very insightful talk in this meeting. And I'll see you again on the ICIIS. Yeah, Prof. Latif will be one of the speakers for the conference.
Thank you, Doctor.
Terima kasih juga dan juga kepada Direktur Pasca Sarjana Prof. Asep, kemudian juga para pimpinan di Pasca Sarjana, Wakil Direktur Prof. Didin, kemudian juga Pak Arif Jamhari, kemudian di sini ada Pak Usep dan juga Bapak dan Ibu pimpinan dari Pasca Sarjana UIN Jambi, UIN Mataram dan UHN Bali. Saya akan bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia karena ini akan sangat teknikal berhubungan dengan publikasi yang kita akan lakukan untuk ICIIS 2022 ini. Prof. Latif, mohon maaf, I will speak in bahasa Indonesia. And yes, that's why the session is divided into 2 sessions. So for the discussion about how to write a high quality paper will be in English language, and now I will speak about how we're going to prepare for the paper for the conference. Bapak dan Ibu, syukur alhamdulillah kita diberi kepercayaan dari Taylor Francis untuk menerbitkan publikasi kita secara open access di Taylor Francis. Berikut adalah beberapa penjelasan terkait, dan saya harap mungkin Bapak dan Ibu yang hadir hari ini akan mulai mempersiapkan paper Bapak dan Ibu, ya, dan kita akan bersama-sama tadi sesuai dengan harapan Prof. Asep untuk membuat tulisan kita banyak dibaca, ya, jadi sehingga kita ilmuwan Muslim dari Indonesia tidak hanya sebagai pembaca, tetapi bisa juga menjadi penyumbang bacaan bermanfaat bagi dunia luas. Di sini kita ICIIS sendiri tahun ini bekerja sama atau kerjasama antar 4 universitas, ya, 4 universitas, yaitu pertama Sekolah Pasca Sarjana UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, kemudian bekerja sama dengan UIN Sultan Taha Saifuddin Jambi. Di sini saya lihat ada Pak Dion dan kawan-kawan, ya, kemudian juga dengan UIN Pasca Sarjana UIN Mataram yang nanti akan menjadi host atau tuan rumah penyelenggaraan konferensi ini sendiri. Kemudian juga program Pasca Sarjana dari Universitas Hindu Negeri I Gusti Bagus Sugriwa Denpasar. Oleh karena itu temanya pun sangat luas. Tahun ini kita tidak hanya tertutup pada interdisciplinary Islam, tetapi juga terbuka pada topik lainnya yang berhubungan dengan religious studies. Waktu dan tempat penyelenggaraan konferensi itu sendiri nanti akan berlangsung di Lombok pada bulan Oktober, yaitu tanggal 19 sampai 20 Oktober. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu yang berkenan untuk hadir secara langsung, save the date and save the ticket, ya, nanti bulan Oktober kita akan berkumpul bersama-sama di Lombok. Ini adalah beberapa speaker dari kegiatan ini. Bapak dan Ibu bisa melihat informasi ini di website, dan salah satu hari ini kita undang Prof. Kraus yang memang penulis yang sangat prolific, ya, memiliki banyak sekali tulisan, kemudian juga beliau sendiri juga menjadi editor di banyak jurnal, sehingga saya pikir menjadi pemantik kepada kita semua untuk mempersiapkan paper kita untuk ICIIS ini sendiri. Nah, ini informasi tentang ICIIS-nya sebelum kita masuk kepada seperti apa sih papernya yang harus kita siapkan sehingga paper kita bisa ikut diterbitkan pada konferensi ini. Nah, Bapak dan Ibu bisa nanti melihat, nanti juga slide ini akan saya share di chat, ya. Jadi informasi ada di https, ya, icis.id. Mudah sekali kalau kita klik icis.id itu langsung kebuka, ya. Nah, di sini conference temanya itu sendiri tahun ini adalah Religion, Education, Science, and Technology towards a more inclusive and sustainable future. Ini adalah tema utamanya, sengaja supaya terbuka banyak sekali tulisan antar interdisipliner, ya, dari antar disiplin ilmu. Ya, kemudian subjek area atau scope adalah Religious and Islamic Studies, Education and Psychology, Ekonomi, Science, dan Social Science. Nah, ini mungkin menjadi catatan penting sebagaimana tadi Prof. Kraus nyatakan bahwa kita harus benar-benar melihat jurnal yang kita tuju. Nah, mungkin sekarang kita melihat publikasi yang kita tuju yaitu proceedingnya, skopnya seperti ini, temanya seperti ini. Jadi untuk memastikan pertama kali bahwa tulisan kita bisa diterbitkan adalah harus sesuai scope dan sesuai dengan tema dari conference. Nah, untuk sementara kita sudah tanda tangan kontrak untuk 250 halaman. Jadi untuk Taylor Francis ini mereka menghitung bukan by article, but they count by pages. Ya, mereka menghitung berdasarkan halaman, 250 halaman. Dan kita ya karena kita ingin memberi kesempatan sebanyak-banyaknya kepada para penulis di 4 universitas ini dan juga di universitas lainnya, maka kita batasi satu tulisan itu hanya 4 sampai 6 halaman. Berarti itu adalah syarat kedua untuk terbit di proceeding ini. Yang pertama tadi adalah scope dan tema, yang kedua adalah jumlah halaman, hanya 4 sampai 6 halaman. Nah, sementara kalau kita punya 250 halaman, maka hanya 40 papers yang akan terpublikasi. Tetapi kontraknya sendiri itu terbuka sampai bisa menambahkan 400. Dan kemarin Prof. Asep dan tadi juga disampaikan bahwa jangan khawatir ya dan lain-lain. Karena memang kesempatan ini terbuka. Jika memang banyak sekali paper yang berkualitas yang ingin diterbitkan, kita masih bisa menambahkan 150 halaman lagi. Berarti sekitar 20 paper lagi. Sehingga tahun ini kita bisa menerbitkan 60 high quality paper, 4 sampai 6 halaman. Nah, karena kita capaiannya adalah tidak hanya sekedar terbit apa adanya, maka kita akan melakukan quality control yang sangat hati-hati ya, karena apalagi tulisan ini akan terbit open access sehingga apa yang ditulis akan dilihat orang dan dianggap mewakili lembaga. Oleh karena itu kita akan memastikan bahwa paper yang masuk dan akan diterbitkan adalah memang yang benar-benar layak. Tapi papernya sendiri nanti juga akan mendapatkan bantuan untuk editing bahasa dari Taylor Francis sendiri. Ya, jadi Bapak dan Ibu awalan boleh tulis dulu dengan bahasa Indonesia, kemudian lakukan penerjemahan yang bisa dibaca, sehingga nanti untuk penghalusan bahasa akan dibantu oleh tim proofreader dari Taylor Francis sendiri. Nah, ini penerbit kita yaitu Taylor Francis. Nanti logo yang akan digunakan di buku adalah Routledge ya, Routledge CRC dengan Taylor Francis sekarang sudah merge dan mereka menjadi satu company. Dan kalau kita lihat dari peringkat 5 publisher akademik terbaik dunia saat ini, Routledge, CRC Balkema, dan Taylor Francis ini berada di urutan ketiga. Oleh karena itu, dengan kita menerbitkan tulisan kita pada proceeding ini, insya Allah itu adalah salah satu publikasi terbaik yang kita bisa banggakan. Nah, kemudian tadi disebutkan bahwa paper akan terpublikasi open access. Open access memang berimbas pada harga. Tapi kalau tadi Prof. Asep bilang sekarang kita konsentrasi untuk kualitas paper, nanti insya Allah ada beberapa skema yang akan ditawarkan di UIN Jakarta, dan saya yakin di 3 institusi lainnya, di UIN Jambi, UIN Mataram, dan UHN Bali juga akan memikirkan skema apa yang akan diberikan kepada dosen dan juga mahasiswa pasca sarjananya. Ini adalah keuntungan dari menerbitkan open access, akan lebih banyak lagi orang yang membaca. Data menunjukkan bahwa ketika sebuah tulisan itu adalah open access, maka visitor yang akan masuk itu akan unik, ya bisa saja sangat beragam, tidak hanya dari satu profesi, ya kemudian juga tidak hanya dari satu disiplin ilmu saja. Dan ini juga berimpak pada increase citation rates, ya citasinya akan lebih meningkat. Meningkat itu kalau open access itu sekitar 62% tulisan akan tersitasi, sedangkan kalau itu adalah subscription access articles itu hanya 38%. Nah, kemudian drives innovation. Kenapa? Karena yang membaca bisa juga anak-anak muda yang mungkin bukan peneliti, tetapi mereka yang content creator, mereka membaca tulisan kita dan itu bisa melahirkan banyak inovasi-inovasi kreatif yang mungkin bukan hanya secara akademik, tetapi hal-hal lainnya. Kemudian memberikan global impact, karena ini terbuka untuk umum atau open access, maka pemerintah ataupun orang-orang yang berada di pemerintahan bisa membacanya karena mereka tidak memerlukan akses untuk membaca tulisan kita. Maka paper-paper policy ini juga akan mempunyai chance yang sangat luas untuk memberikan dampak yang luar biasa. Kemudian public access, ya tadi disebutkan siapa saja bisa membaca asal mereka punya koneksi internet, ya maka mereka bisa download dan membaca tulisan kita. Comply with funder policies. Mungkin Bapak dan Ibu ada yang beberapa yang mendapatkan hibah penelitian dan salah satu syaratnya adalah menggunakan dana tersebut untuk open access publikasi. Nah, ini bisa menjadi satu alternatif bahwa dana penelitian digunakan untuk open access publikasi berupa proceeding book. Nah, buku proceeding ini nanti akan terpublikasi di halaman resmi ataupun halaman utama dari Taylor Francis, ya, dan juga nanti akan terkoneksi dengan open access atau www.oapen.org, ya, dan ini juga Bapak dan Ibu akan bebas men-share di sosial media, di ResearchGate, atau membagikannya kepada siapa saja, atau menampilkannya di prodi maupun di fakultas ataupun di universitas. Ya, itulah keuntungan dari open access itu sendiri. Nah, kemudian ini berikut adalah contoh tampilan yang nanti mungkin kira-kira buku kita akan terbit seperti ini. Tujuannya untuk memotivasi Bapak dan Ibu. Oke, begitu profesionalnya dan juga begitu kita akan melihat ya bagaimana akses akan diberikan oleh Taylor Francis agar pembaca tulisan kita itu luas, ya. Mereka akan membantu juga untuk mengiklankan atau men-share informasi tentang buku kita kepada channel yang mereka miliki termasuk mailing list. Ya, halaman-halaman berikut adalah dummy, jadi bukan halaman resminya yang kita buat untuk sebagai perakiraan sehingga Bapak dan Ibu mendapatkan gambaran seperti inilah buku yang akan terbit nantinya. Ini nanti websitenya Taylor Francis, Bapak dan Ibu bisa buka sendiri ya di website www.taylorfrancis.com. Ya, ini halaman utamanya akan ada di sini. Nanti ketika kita klik products, maka akan muncul tampilan seperti ini, ya, products, ya. Kemudian akan ada buku, ya, dan nanti buku kita kurang lebih misalnya ini buku kita, ini adalah dummy-nya, ya, ini akan terbit. Maka dia akan muncul setidaknya 1 bulan pertama akan muncul di halaman muka, ya, jadi akan terekspos sangat baik sekali, apalagi di sini akan ada tulisan open access sehingga orang bisa mendownloadnya, ya, sesuka hati. Kalau misalnya dia tidak ada open access-nya, maka mereka hanya bisa membaca abstrak, ya. Yang ini yang berikutnya kita lihat hanya by subscription atau by token, sehingga yang membaca juga kalangan yang sangat terbatas. Nanti akan dijelaskan buku ini abstraknya seperti apa, ya. Kemudian nanti akan diterbitkan dengan Taylor Francis London. Kita kerjasama dan tanda tangan dengan Taylor Francis Netherlands, tapi percetakan mereka sendiri untuk publikasi ada di London. Nah, kurang lebih nanti akan tampil seperti ini, dan di sini akan terlihat open access fundernya. Kalau UIN Jakarta ada beberapa skema yang ditawarkan, tapi nanti mungkin bukan dalam pertemuan ini, nanti akan ada pertemuan internal yang akan membicarakan secara khusus ya seperti apa yang akan diberikan bantuan kepada dosen dan juga kepada mahasiswa pasca sarjana. Nah, kemudian nanti ini adalah buku depannya akan seperti ini, ya. Jadi mungkin akan sangat prestigious dan membanggakan sekali ketika kita bisa share di sosial media dan juga membagikan buku ini kepada rekan ataupun mitra kita. Nah, kemudian juga ini halaman berikutnya akan seperti ini, ya. Jadi akan selalu ditulis proceeding, tetapi judul bukunya sendiri adalah Religion, Education, Science, and Technology Towards a More Inclusive and Sustainable Future. Nah, di sini nanti akan ada baru di sini Routledge Netherlands yang dimana kita menandatangani kontrak yang akan menjadi copyright ownernya dari tulisan dari publikasi ini, ya. Kemudian nanti, nah ini table of contents-nya. Jadi tulisan Bapak dan Ibu pastikan harus berada pada 5 scope ini. karena kalau tidak maka akan tersisih dari awal ya, karena kita akan ada proses editor review yang dimana akan melihat apakah tulisan sesuai dengan scope ya. Kalau sesuai dengan scope maka nanti bisa ditampilkan pada seksi-seksi yang sudah disiapkan, yaitu 5 seksi sesuai dengan 5 scope yang kita ajukan kepada Taylor Francis. Yang tadi yang pertama adalah Religious and Islamic Studies, Education and Psychology, Economy, Science and Social Science. Nah, kemudian ini adalah panitia yang memang tergabung dari 4 universitas tadi. Ya, kemudian ini nanti acknowledgement-nya akan dipastikan akan menuliskan nama-nama pihak yang terlibat. Ya, kemudian ini seperti ini kurang lebih. Setelah section maka akan mulai tulisan yang pertama terkait dengan Religious and Islamic Studies. Ya, kemudian sampai 5 section tadi. Sekarang kita akan lihat bagaimana quality assurance akan kita pastikan. Karena tulisan ini akan diajukan untuk beberapa lembaga indexing, termasuk Elsevier Scopus, ya, kemudian Clarified Analytics, atau yang dulunya disebut sebagai Thomson Reuters ataupun Web of Science. Ya, nah quality assurance ini jadi setelah melewati proses editor maka akan ada proses review. Ya, setelah itu Taylor Francis sendiri akan melihat apakah tulisan ini layak untuk diindeks, diajukan di indeks ataupun diajukan di indeks. Nah, kemudian ketika diajukan di indeks, Scopus akan melihat apakah tulisan ini layak untuk diindeks. Oleh karena itu kita akan benar-benar memastikan step by step, dan ICIIS sendiri, panitia ICIIS sendiri sudah mempersiapkan mekanisme dan programnya. Ya, kita ada beberapa program workshop di mana Bapak dan Ibu bisa mengecek langsung apakah tulisannya sudah memenuhi syarat-syarat tertentu. Di sini termasuk tentang etika penulisan dan lain-lain. Nanti pada sesi berikutnya kita akan bicara lebih lanjut apa yang dimaksud dengan etika penelitian, etika penulisan menurut Taylor Francis, karena mereka jelas sekali menyebutkan misal tidak menampilkan foto, terlihat wajah depan dan lain-lain. Ya, nanti mungkin kita akan ada satu sesi sendiri yang memang kita rancang dalam workshop yang kita siapkan. Nah, ini adalah prosesnya Bapak dan Ibu. Jadi nanti semua paper itu akan disubmit di Easy Chair, ya, sebuah sistem di mana seperti kita OJS Journal, ya, tetapi ini adalah untuk pengelolaan proceeding. Kalau Bapak dan Ibu tadi buka website www.icis2022.id, nanti di situ ada submission, Bapak dan Ibu klik submission. Nah, di submission itu ada klik untuk langsung ke Easy Chair itu sendiri. Ya, jadi kalau Bapak dan Ibu sudah ready dengan papernya, maka bisa diajukan langsung ke sana. Jadi kita tidak menerima paper by WhatsApp atau by email. Ya, ini salah satunya juga adalah untuk menjunjung tinggi transparansi, ya, yang sebagaimana yang diminta oleh pihak publisher. Nah, yang pertama kita akan memasukkan ke Easy Chair, kemudian tim editor akan melihat, dan kita memiliki editorial checklist di mana akan dilihat basic requirements-nya terpenuhi atau tidak. Jika basic requirements-nya terpenuhi, maka paper Bapak dan Ibu akan diteruskan kepada reviewer sesuai bidang keahliannya dan sesuai dengan topik tulisan Bapak dan Ibu. Dan review akan dilakukan secara double blind review. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu tidak akan tahu siapa yang mereview, dan mereka juga tidak akan tahu paper siapa yang direview. Nah, kemudian setelah kita targetkan reviewer, ini mungkin terlalu singkat ya. Kalau ada Prof. Kraus dia akan protes ya, karena cuma 1-2 minggu saja untuk mereview. Kalau kita memulainya di bulan Juni, kita akan punya waktu lebih panjang untuk mereview, mungkin 2-3 minggu diberikan waktu kepada reviewer untuk membaca dengan sungguh-sungguh. Tetapi kita juga akan memastikan bahwa paper yang akan diberikan ke reviewer itu tadi memenuhi basic requirements yang akan saya bacakan setelah slide ini. Ya, setelah diberikan review setidaknya oleh 2 orang, maka editor akan memutuskan apakah paper itu akan dilanjutkan untuk diperbaiki atau langsung di-reject atau langsung diterima. Ya, setelah itu nanti kita juga ada workshop untuk persiapan publikasi. Bapak dan Ibu yang sudah melewati tahapan ini akan diberikan juga tools ya dan juga bantuan bagaimana caranya untuk mempersiapkan draft akhirnya. Nah, ini editorial checklist. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu yang sekarang mungkin sudah tertarik dan sudah punya paper, pastikan untuk memenuhi syarat ini dulu sebelum dimasukkan ke easy chair supaya tidak langsung tertolak oleh sistem, karena kita memang ya mengikuti rambu-rambu dengan sangat ketat sekali supaya memang paper yang kita akan terbitkan benar-benar paper-paper yang berkualitas dan akan membawa nama baik dan rekognisi pada institusi kita masing-masing. Yang pertama, the paper itu manuskrip ya harus sesuai dengan scope, ya tadi scope yang 5 tadi. Kemudian similarity check is less than 15%. Jadi mungkin Bapak dan Ibu lakukan pengecekan terlebih dahulu. Kalau masih di atas 15% maka dikurangi. Kita di sini tidak the number of pages is between 4 to 6, ya 4 sampai 6 ya papernya. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu mungkin yang punya long paper bisa diambil bagian mana yang mungkin menarik, mungkin dikurangi pembahasan dan juga datanya dikurangi tanpa mengurangi isi ya. Atau juga bisa juga kalau misalnya terlalu banyak pembahasan, ambil satu rumusan masalah saja yang dibahas, sehingga 6 itu sudah termasuk dengan references. Jadi mungkin Bapak dan Ibu bisa memperkirakan 5 halaman itu adalah konten dan 1 halaman itu adalah references dengan acknowledgement. The topic is novel and is appealing for international audiences. Topiknya tidak mesti topik internasional ataupun komparatif, tapi seperti tadi Prof. Kraus katakan, kita bisa mengangkat topik lokal, tetapi pembahasannya menggunakan perspektif internasional ataupun bisa berguna untuk dunia internasional. The paper should comprise at very least a title, ya isinya adalah title, abstract, introduction, methodology, findings, discussion, and references. Ini adalah minimum isinya seperti ini. Bapak dan Ibu kalau membuka website ICIIS, di situ ada template, jadi bisa langsung menuliskan di template tersebut, ya sehingga memudahkan tidak menyalahi aturan tulisan dan lain-lain. The paper is written in English. Ini masih kemarin masih banyak pertanyaan, boleh nggak sih bahasa Indonesia? Jadi di UIN Jakarta sendiri kita membolehkan menulis dalam bahasa Indonesia yang kemudian nanti akan diterjemahkan dengan baik, ya baru kemudian disubmit. Ya karena diproses. Jadi kalau memang papernya belum ready dalam bahasa Inggris, Bapak dan Ibu ikuti workshop yang disiapkan oleh ICIIS. Ya di dalam salah satu ataupun 2 ya workshop itu akan ada pembahasan bagaimana cara mentranslate ya dan tools apa yang bisa digunakan untuk memperbaiki bahasa Inggris secara mandiri ya dan lain-lain. Di sini tadi ada pertanyaan berapa referensi, tetapi untuk kita ya menyamaratakan, bukan menyamaratakan ya, paling tidak satu paper dengan paper yang lain memiliki kualitas yang tidak terlalu berbeda, maka kita menuliskan di sini bahwa paper itu referensinya setidaknya 15 sampai 25, jangan terlalu banyak juga referensinya karena jumlah halamannya hanya 6. Ya, dan 80% itu dari reputable international journal published within the recent 10 years. Ini adalah dalam rangka untuk meningkatkan possibility tulisan kita untuk terindeks di Scopus. Nah, sebelum Bapak dan Ibu memasukkan kepada sistem easy chair tadi, tolong diperiksa dulu ini supaya Bapak dan Ibu tidak kecewa karena dikembalikan papernya. Insya Allah ketika 7 butir checklist ini terpenuhi, tentu saja paper akan diteruskan kepada reviewer ya dan Bapak dan Ibu akan mendapatkan feedback untuk bagaimana membuat paper itu menjadi jauh lebih baik. Nah, kemudian ini adalah important dates. Workshop ini sudah berlangsung ya di SPS UIN Jakarta. Ya, ada beberapa kelompok yang melakukan workshop ya, dan ini kita targetkan sampai bulan Mei kita akan terus melakukan workshop dan pemberian bantuan ya, termasuk juga kita terbuka kepada kawan-kawan dari UIN lainnya ya untuk pelaksanaan workshop ini sendiri. Nah, full manuscript submission, ya, tulisan yang tadi 6 halaman, 4 sampai 6 halaman itu kami harapkan sudah masuk ke Easy Chair, Bapak dan Ibu masukkan ke Easy Chair itu tanggal 18 Juni. Supaya prosesnya itu tidak tergesa-gesa dan kita benar-benar bisa menjamin kualitas dari paper. Ya, kalau kita terlalu mundur nanti proses reviewnya tidak akan baik. Ya, nanti akhirnya apa adanya paper kita akan terbit dan itu juga akan menurunkan kans kita untuk terindeks di beberapa indeks terbaik dunia tadi. Kemudian notification of acceptance kita targetkan pada bulan Juli, Bapak dan Ibu yang mengirimkan Juli 30 ya, Bapak dan Ibu yang mengirimkan paper sudah mendapatkan jawaban. Tapi tentu saja setiap kali Bapak dan Ibu menulis ya, ketika ini diteruskan kepada reviewer, maka statusnya akan berubah ya, assign to reviewer. Tetapi kalau misalnya sudah di-reject di editorial karena tadi tidak memenuhi syarat yang 7, Bapak dan Ibu papernya akan langsung rejected dalam waktu hitungan hari atau minggu. Nah, yang notification of acceptance itu kalau sudah memasuki reviewer dan dianggap secara konten berkualitas oleh reviewer ahli kita. Final camera ready itu September 5 ya. Jadi kenapa September 5? Kita menargetkan jadi sebelum conference paper itu udah masuk. Ya, kenapa? Karena kita berharap tulisan ini bisa terbit di tahun 2022. Sehingga di bulan Desember 2022 kita sudah tulisan kita sudah online ya. Konferensinya sendiri tanggal 19 sampai 20, tetapi final camera ready papernya itu adalah di tanggal 5 September. Jadi lebih awal dari konferensinya sendiri. Nah, ini Bapak dan Ibu beberapa kegiatan yang kita siapkan agar tulisan Bapak dan Ibu memenuhi syarat. Mungkin tadi ada yang bertanya juga sudah ada paper banyak ya. Nah, ini Bapak Ibu yang punya banyak paper bisa diambil salah satunya, kemudian disesuaikan. Nah, kita memberikan program yang bisa membantu Bapak dan Ibu untuk menyesuaikan tulisan tersebut agar memenuhi syarat mengikuti pedoman dari Taylor Francis book proceeding ini sendiri. Hari ini kita memulai dengan kick off. Nanti selanjutnya setelah Lebaran kita akan umumkan kegiatan berikutnya adalah akan dibicarakan lebih lanjut seperti apa template-nya, ya cara menulisnya seperti apa, dan kemudian nanti Bapak dan Ibu akan dibagi dalam breaking out room dan berbicara dengan beberapa orang ahli yang kita undang untuk membaca. Bapak Ibu bisa tanya jawab apakah tulisan saya sesuai scope, ya bagaimana supaya ini tadi menggunakan perspektif internasional ya dan lain-lain. Nah, setelah selesai itu kita anggap bahwa Bapak dan Ibu sudah memiliki judul dan apa tema yang sesuai dengan tema dan skop dari konferensi ini, maka kita akan atur program untuk writing workshop. Writing workshop ini ada beberapa tahapannya dan ini ada yang praktikal, technical cara penulisannya, misalnya ya tadi menerjemahkan tulisan seperti apa, ya kemudian menghaluskannya, memparaphrase tulisan menggunakan tools apa, ya kemudian mengecek grammar menggunakan tools apa, ini juga akan disampaikan di sini. Selain itu juga akan disampaikan juga hal-hal yang berhubungan dengan bagaimana membuat introduction yang baik, ya kemudian metode, menyampaikan metode yang jelas dan seterusnya. Nah, kemudian setelah Bapak dan Ibu selesai workshop ini dan papernya sudah melalui proses review, ya setelah mengikuti workshop dan sudah pede, Bapak dan Ibu bisa submit papernya di bulan Juni, ya tanggal 18, karena writing workshopnya kita rencanakan di bulan Mei, ya jadi ada waktu akhir Mei itu sudah menghaluskan tulisan sehingga di 18 Juni sudah bisa dimasukkan tulisan Bapak dan Ibu. Nah, setelah tulisan itu dimasukkan ke sistem dan kita mendapatkan review dari editor dan kemudian editor memberikan kepada reviewer dan reviewer memberikan feedback, kita akan memberikan sesi lagi di mana Bapak dan Ibu bisa bertanya bagaimana cara memperbaiki jika saya mendapatkan komentar begini dari reviewer. Jadi kalau kita lihat programnya ini akan saling terkait ya, dan Bapak dan Ibu akan dikawal dari menentukan judul dan seterusnya, dan ini baik untuk Bapak dan Ibu yang mungkin sedang berlatih menulis ataupun memang yang sudah menjadi penulis profesional atau memiliki banyak tulisan. Ini adalah pembiayaan. Pembiayaan itu sendiri untuk bisa terpublikasi tulisannya, kita anggap kita adalah local participant. Biayanya adalah untuk early bird itu adalah 5 juta rupiah atau $350 ya, di mana biaya ini termasuk biaya publikasi open access dan promosi buku oleh Taylor Francis, biaya proofread bahasa oleh Taylor Francis, biaya persiapan tulisan mulai dari workshop, review, dan administrasi manuskrip dalam sistem. Memang biaya terbesar itu adalah pada open access. Ya, nilai kontraknya itu memang agak luar biasa, tetapi ini adalah salah satu cara kita untuk meningkatkan keterbacaan dari tulisan-tulisan terbaik di kampus kita masing-masing. Cek sponsorship within your organization. Saya tadi Prof. Asep bilang silakan fokus dulu menulis, dan di Puslitpen juga ada beberapa anggaran untuk Bapak Ibu dosen yang nanti mungkin Puslitpen akan mengundang Puslitpen UIN Jakarta mengundang Bapak Ibu dosen UIN Jakarta untuk hadir dalam kegiatannya untuk membicarakan seperti apa skema-skema yang bisa ditawarkan. Itu saja Pak Usep, paparan dari saya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Ibu Maila untuk penyajiannya yang sangat informatif, rinci, dan luar biasa sekali ya. Silakan kita buka tanya jawab kepada Ibu Maila. Barangkali para peserta semuanya ada yang ingin ditanyakan. Silakan, ini saatnya. Ya. Mungkin tadi diantaranya Bu Maila yang 4-6 halaman itu satu spasi atau double space itu ya.
Oke, saya buka ininya ya Pak ya, template-nya. Ya, jadi template-nya sendiri adalah, oke sebentar saya buka dulu. Oke. Oh ini whiteboard ya, oke sebentar. Sebentar. Saya buka dulu deh kalau gitu. Template, oke. Ya, ini adalah template dari jurnalnya. Jadi single spasi ya. Single spasi. Ini judulnya. Jadi kalau Bapak dan Ibu download di website ICIIS, Bapak Ibu langsung nulis aja di sini. Ini dalam rangka supaya langsung sesuai dan dia langsung otomatis mengikuti. Ya, nah ini seperti ini. Tentu saja judulnya jangan general instruction tadi, sesuai dengan syarat minimum kita, introduction, metodologi, result, discussion, kemudian conclusion. Nah, di sini seperti ini, dan di sini juga dijelaskan cara penulisan tabelnya. Ya, nah ini menjadi syarat kita juga untuk tulisan dilanjutkan kepada reviewer bahwa Bapak dan Ibu menuliskan sesuai dengan template ini. Saya akan bagikan juga di di chat untuk Bapak dan Ibu yang ada di sini untuk bisa download.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Maila. Silakan kepada para peserta untuk bertanya, barangkali ada yang belum jelas. Silakan baik dari UIN Jakarta, dari UHN Bali, dari UIN Jambi, dari UIN Mataram. Itu silakan. Ya. Ya, Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Silakan Bu Rosnani Siregar.
Iya Pak, saya mahasiswa SPS UIN Jakarta. Mau bertanya sedikit Pak, yang ketika mau buat artikel ini. Yang disubmit tadi kan boleh berbahasa Indonesia ya Pak ya?
Boleh, ya, asal jangan bahasa Jawa ya.
Ya oke Pak, saya maksudnya nanti seperti buat makalah biasa ya Pak, pakai kertas seperti buat makalah ukuran kertas tadi kan spasi 1, apakah A4 atau A5 atau begini apa lembarannya Pak? Ukuran kertas, ukuran tulisan itu kan, Pak? Spasinya 1, ukuran kertasnya apa Pak yang dipakai? Apa A4 atau seperti ukuran buat makalah biasa?
Bu Maila ya pertanyaannya.
Oke,
Silakan Bu Maila.
oke Ibu. Jadi papernya bentuknya seperti paper jurnal, tetapi jumlahnya lebih sedikit. Jadi kalau paper jurnal sekarang kan itu syaratnya yang Bapak Ibu mungkin sering dengar imrot ya, introduction, methods, result, ya, discussion. Nah itu yang kita harapkan. Tetapi karena ini hanya 6 halaman, mungkin sebagai gambaran dari beberapa pengalaman saya dan pengalaman saya membaca ya, beberapa artikel yang terbit di Proceeding Taylor Francis, itu biasanya 1,5 halaman pada introduction, setengah sampai 3/4 halaman ya pada methods, ya, kemudian result itu biasanya 2 halaman, ya, 1,5 sampai 2 halaman, discussion itu 1 halaman, ya, conclusion hanya 1 paragraf, ya. Jadi dengan begitu kurang lebih 6 halaman tadi terpenuhi.
Oke. Oke Bu, makasih Bu infonya Bu, biar kita siapkan.
Ya, sudah jelas ya Bu Rosnani.
Ya, Pak.
Baik, ada pertanyaan
Saya.
Boleh
ya,
Pak.
baik Mas Teguh, saya bacakan dulu yang di chat ya Mas Teguh, sabar. Pertanyaan dari Guru Izdian, dari Pak Izdian. Mohon izin bertanya, komprehensi offline-nya di mana? Apakah ada akomodasi yang disiapkan oleh panitia untuk peserta yang ingin hadir secara offline? Silakan Bu Maila.
Oke, Bapak dan Ibu, saya bukakan website dari ICIIS ya. Jadi di website ICIIS ada beberapa informasi, termasuk seperti apa nanti programnya. Oke, sebentar saya share. Oke, di sini kalau Bapak dan Ibu lihat di website bahwa kegiatan akan berlangsung di Lombok. Ini masih kita tuliskan Novotel karena syarat dari pengajuan kepada publisher harus ada nama tempat yang jelas. Tetapi ini masih tentatif menunggu kepastian dari kawan-kawan dari UIN Mataram, ketersediaan tempatnya seperti apa. Nah, untuk pembiayaan kita lihat ya, karena ini berhubungan dengan akomodasi. Jadi kalau Bapak dan Ibu lihat tadi biaya yang 350 itu adalah jika Bapak Ibu menjadi presenter, ya, kemudian menerbitkan tulisan. Tetapi tidak disebutkan di sini akomodasi. Nah, ini berarti akomodasi masih di luar dari ini sendiri. Ya, nanti mungkin kita akan tambahkan informasi ini di website, ya, seperti apa. Ada beberapa alternatif, mungkin tidak hanya di hotel tempat penyelenggaraan conference, tetapi mungkin ada beberapa alternatif lainnya yang bisa kita gunakan untuk menyesuaikan, ya. Kita akan stay di hotel yang mana. Itu Bapak nanti diupdate terus websitenya, Bapak dan Ibu bisa selalu lihat update-nya nanti di website.
Baik, silakan. Terima kasih Bu Maila. Silakan Pak Teguh.
Pak, saya mau tanya Pak, untuk mendaftarkan tulisan kita, submit tulisan kita di Easy Chair itu setelah kita ikut beberapa kali workshop yang dilaksanakan oleh ICIIS ya Pak ya. Itu saja.
Terima kasih Pak Teguh. Silakan Bu Maila.
Iya, terima kasih Pak Usep. Jadi tadi kita sebenarnya boleh aja, mau sekarang langsung isi juga boleh, tetapi mungkin baiknya Bapak dan Ibu mengecek tadi 7 checklist untuk melihat apakah paper kita udah ready atau tidak. Ya, di website itu dijelaskan, ya, dituliskan juga 7 checklistnya itu apa. Ya, jadi ini kalau Bapak dan Ibu buka ICIIS 2022 ya, saya tuliskan di chat ya. Jadi kalau Bapak Ibu buka ICIIS 2022, nah ini di atas itu ada beberapa pilihan. Kalau untuk mengirimkan tulisan, Bapak dan Ibu tulis di submission. Nah, hari ini pun sudah bisa ya. Jadi kalau kita buka klik submission ya, tapi pastikan supaya tidak membuang waktu Bapak dan Ibu sendiri. Karena kalau misalnya ternyata belum memenuhi standar paper 1 sampai 7, kita akan langsung reject. Ya, ya tadi satu manuskrip fits the scope, similarity check less than 15%, the number of pages is between 4 to 6, topic is novel and is appealing, ya paper should compromise, ya ini tadi title, abstract, introduction, methodology, findings, discussion, references, paper written in English, kemudian ada 15 sampai 25. Kalau kita yakin, oh ya saya sudah memenuhi syarat, paper saya sudah memenuhi syarat, Bapak dan Ibu bisa langsung submit, klik ini, easy chair. Ya nanti ketika diklik easy chair ini akan langsung kepada, nah ini bisa, nah kalau misalnya Bapak dan Ibu belum membuat account, karena pertama kali untuk memasukkan artikel, maka Bapak dan Ibu klik create an account, ya create an account, ya kemudian langsung masukkan account, cara nulis, ya dan lain-lain ya, ikuti petunjuknya. Nanti ketika sudah dapat account, Bapak dan Ibu bisa, saya misalnya sudah punya account, saya masukkan, saya akan login, ya saya login, kemudian saya mau ini ICIIS udah langsung keluar kan, ICIIS the 5th International Colloquium of International. Nah di sini langsung make a new submission. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu langsung klik ini make a new submission. Nah nanti langsung masuk ya, langsung first name-nya siapa, last name siapa, author pertama, kedua, ketiga, organisasinya apa, kemudian nanti siapa yang jadi corresponding author. Nah kemudian masukkan title, abstract, keywords, ya, kemudian filenya di-upload di sini, kemudian Bapak Ibu klik submit. Nah, kalau tidak mau membuang waktu, tadi kita sampaikan berulang kali, coba dipastikan bahwa tulisan itu memenuhi syarat dari ini ya, standar paper. Untuk apa namanya template ya di halaman submission tadi, jadi kalau diklik ICIIS, klik submission, ini muncul di sini template, ya template, klik here. Itu langsung ada template yang saya bagikan di chat tadi. Itu Pak Teguh.
Bu Maila mungkin menambah pertanyaan dari Pak Teguh tadi, apa ada ketentuan jumlah kata?
Tidak ada ketentuan jumlah kata. Jadi mereka memang standarnya halaman, Pak. Asal mengikuti template yang mereka siapkan.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Maila. Masih ada pertanyaan dari Bu Saadah El Jannah. Mohon izin bertanya, ada beberapa skop tema religius and Islamic Studies, Science, dan lain-lain. Semua artikel yang masuk harus menyinggung persoalan teknologi atau tidak mesti. Karena secara clear, tema umum, komprehensi, temanya juga berkaitan dengan teknologi. Terima kasih.
Oke. Bapak Ibu, ini mungkin agak terbalik-balik dengan konferensi kami yang lainnya. Ya, kita memang ada di UI Jakarta konferensi yang temanya hanya tentang teknologi ya, berhubungan dengan teknologi. Tapi kalau kita lihat judul ataupun tema kita, ya judul buku proceeding kita itu nanti adalah religion. Jadi tema-tema yang berhubungan dengan religion ya dalam berbagai perspektif diperbolehkan. Education tidak mesti dengan teknologi, religion tidak mesti dengan teknologi, science and technology, ya jadi science dan teknologi juga diperbolehkan. Yang paling penting adalah kita bicara tentang bagaimana kita mempersiapkan ya pendidikan, religion, science, teknologi ke dunia yang masa depan yang lebih inklusif, ya kemudian lebih, dan kita berharap bisa menjadi sustainable atau pembangunan ataupun pendidikan ataupun cara beragama yang berkelanjutan. Itu maksudnya.
Terima kasih Bu Maila. Silakan Bapak Ibu semua partisipan, jika ada yang masih ingin ditanyakan ya untuk langsung saja berbicara atau memberikan tanda tangan. Baik, kelihatannya sudah cukup jelas ini Bu Maila.
Iya.
Dan kelihatannya sejumlah 116 ini insya Allah sudah siap untuk menulis, baik individual maupun mungkin tadi seperti yang disarankan secara kolaboratif ya. Untuk selanjutnya sebelum ditutup mungkin Mbak Dewi bisa bantu untuk screenshot ya. Silakan semuanya untuk menampakkan wajahnya dari dunia maya kepada dunia nyata. Baik ya. Pak Arif, silakan Mbak Dewi. Mbak Dewi Hairani maksud saya, karena banyak Dewi
banyak
ya.
Dewi nih Pak nih. Benar ya Bapak Ibu, saya siap-siap buat motret dulu. Silakan Bapak Ibu yang berkelegaan buat nyalain kamera. Oke. Sebentar ya, ini banyak soalnya ada 3 halaman. Halaman pertama dulu ya. 3, 2, 1, smile. Oke, 1 sudah. Sebentar. Di-save dulu. Ya, kita ke halaman kedua. 1, 2, 3. Halaman kedua udah nggak ada yang pada videoan nih. Oke, di-save dulu.
Yang halaman ketiga silakan nampakkan wajahnya. Oh, semuanya di dunia maya.
Kayaknya begitu nih Pak nih.
Ya.
Oke, selesai. Sudah 3 halaman.
Baik. Ya.
Sudah foto semuanya.
Baik, terima kasih Mbak Dewi Hairani. Terima kasih Ibu Maila untuk pemaparannya yang sangat luar biasa sekali. Terima kasih Pak Profesor Abdul Latif Kraus, dan terutama terima kasih kepada Bapak Profesor Asep Saifuddin Jahar, MA PhD, ya, Direktur Sekolah Pasca Sarjana UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, juga kepada Pak Dr. Hamka, Wakil Direktur, dan juga terutama kepada para partisipan ya, semuanya yang sampai saat ini masih di atas 100, alhamdulillah Bu Maila ya, 106 sudah mengikuti dengan baik, dan silakan dicek lagi ke chat itu. Ada free database yang sudah diberikan oleh Bu Maila dan juga link ke ICIIS 5 ini ya. Kita sebutnya supaya mudah ICIIS ya. Karena dekat dengan kata-kata ICIIS gitu ya, money atau ICIIS. Juga ada link-link yang lain, silakan dilihat ya. Barangkali sebelum ditutup ada kata-kata terakhir dari Pak Direktur, Pak Prof. Asep, barangkali.
Sudah cukup, silakan
Sudah cukup,
ditutup.
Ya. Terima kasih Pak Prof. Asep, ya. Terima kasih Pak Dr. Arif Jamhari dan semuanya partisipan baik dari UIN Jakarta, dari UIN Jambi, dari UHN Bali, ya. Dan semoga tadarus kita pada saat ini menghasilkan nanti publikasi di Routledge ya, yang akan diterbitkan di Routledge. Luar biasa sekali, Bu Maila. Marilah kita tutup. Ya, Pak Isnaini. Marilah kita tutup dengan bacaan hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Mohon maaf jika ada kata-kata yang kurang berkenan dari saya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bu Maila, Pak Usep.
Sama-sama.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jazakumullah khair. Terima kasih.
Izin live ya.
Assalamualaikum.
Izin live Pak Usep.
Terima kasih Bu Maila.